December 1943. A German fighter pilot pulled alongside a crippled American bomber and made a choice that could have gotten him executed. Then both pilots went home and stayed silent for 47 years. When they finally found each other, they discovered something more powerful than war. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. Charlie Brown brought his B-17 back to England on December 20th, 1943. The aircraft they called the Old Pub landed at Half Sithing, with 1 dead gunner aboard and 10 wounded men barely alive. Ground crews walked around the bomber in disbelief. They could not understand how it stayed airborne. Massive holes in the fuselage, tail section nearly blown off, blood everywhere inside. A German fighter had escorted them to safety instead of finishing them off. The response was immediate and clear. Never speak of this again. Do not tell the crew. Do not tell other pilots. If word got out that German pilots could show mercy, it might create dangerous sentiment among Allied airmen. The official line was simple. You cannot be human and fly in a German cockpit. The enemy must remain the enemy. He went to college, rejoined the Air Force in 1949, and served until 1965. Rose to the rank of colonel, became a State Department Foreign Service officer. Made trips to Laos and Vietnam during those conflicts. Retired in 1972 and moved to Miami. Became an inventor. Built a life. Raised a family. But he never forgot. His daughter would later recall her father's nightmares. She remembers him waking up in cold sweats. The war never really left him. Always underneath the post-traumatic stress and the memories of combat was one haunting image. The German pilot in the Messerschmitt Bf-109 flying alongside them. The man who looked directly at Charlie through the cockpit window. The salute before he broke away. Who was he? Meanwhile, Franz Stigler also stayed silent. He landed near Bremen after escorting the B-17 to safety and said nothing to his commanding officers. The penalty for deliberately sparing enemy aircraft in combat was execution by firing squad. If anyone discovered he let 10 Americans escape when he could have shot them down, he would face immediate military justice. He survived Germany's collapse in 1945. Survived the chaos of defeat and occupation. In 1953, he immigrated to Canada, got married, became a successful businessman in Vancouver. He too built a new life. He too tried to move on. The B-17 with massive holes in its fuselage. The wounded crew fighting to survive. Franz would later say he lost his appetite for victory after that day. He stopped aggressively pursuing aircraft to shoot down. The sight of that shattered bomber and its dying crew changed something fundamental in him. Both men carried the memory in silence for decades. An encounter that lasted maybe 10 minutes had marked them both permanently. Neither spoke about it, neither searched for the other. The war ended, life moved forward, but the memory remained. 1986. Boston, Mass. A combat pilot reunion called Gathering of the Eagles. By now, Charlie Brown is 64 years old. Retired Air Force colonel living in Miami. Boeing has invited old bomber pilots to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the B-17's first flight back in 19. During the event, someone asks Charlie if he had any memorable missions during World War II. He thinks for a moment. The crippled bomber. The German fighter that appeared on their wing instead of shooting. The escort to safety through German anti-aircraft positions. The salute. Who was he? Did he survive the war? Is he still alive? Charlie realizes something. He has carried this question for 43 years without ever seriously trying to answer it. Right then, he decides. I need to find him. He starts with official channels. Contacts the United States Air Force. Writes to West German Air Force Archives. Requests records from the Army Air Force Historical Office. Surely someone somewhere has documentation of German pilots stationed near Bremen in December 19. The records do not exist. Or they are incomplete. Or they have been lost, or they are still classified. Dead end after dead end, the German military archives were scattered across divided Germany after the war. The Luftwaffe's detailed records were destroyed during Allied bombing or captured by the Soviets. Finding one specific pilot from one specific day in 1943 is nearly impossible. Thousands of German fighter pilots flew during the war. Most are dead. His nightmares continue. He wakes in cold sweats, remembering the flak explosions, the attacking fighters, the dying crew members, and always the question. Who was the German pilot? Why did he spare us? Is he still alive somewhere? Does he remember? In 1989, Charlie tries a different approach. He writes a detailed account of the incident and sends it to a newsletter for combat pilots. Both American and German veterans received this publication. The letter describes everything: the date, the location, the circumstances, the Bf-109's markings. Everything he remembers. He includes one specific detail. The German pilot had looked directly at him through the cockpit glass, and then given a salute before breaking away and disappearing into the sky. Charlie sends the letter and waits. He is 67 years old now. More than 46 years have passed since that day over Germany. The German pilot might be dead, might never have survived the war, might have died in the decades since. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, Canada, Franz Stigler is 74 years old. He too had attended Boeing's 50th anniversary event back in 1980. Franz had also been making quiet inquiries. Over the years, he wanted to know if the bomber made it back to England. If the crew survived, he contacted old Luftwaffe veteran associations. Asked around at gatherings. No answers. Nobody knew anything about an American bomber escorted to safety by a German fighter. He reads it carefully. The data matches. December 20th, 1940. The location matches near Bremen. The circumstances match perfectly. A heavily damaged B-17, flying alone. A German fighter that pulled alongside instead of attacking. After 47 years, Franz knows the B-17 crew survived. They made it home. All those years wondering if his choice mattered. Now he knows. Franz sits down and writes a letter. January 18th, 1990. Charlie receives an envelope from Canada. Inside is a letter that begins with 4 words. I was the one. Charlie's hands shake as he reads. Franz describes the encounter in perfect detail. Details only the German pilot would know. The condition of the bomber. The wounds visible through the holes in the fuselage. The desperate faces of the crew. When Charlie and Franz first spoke on the phone, Franz described his aircraft. Every detail Charlie needed to confirm this was the German pilot from December 20th, 1943. Franz explained his reasoning. When he pulled alongside the old pub and saw the extent of the damage, when he looked through the holes in the fuselage and saw the desperate crew trying to save each other, he remembered the words of his commanding officer, Gustav Rodel, a legendary Luftwaffe ace who told his pilots one thing. To Franz, the men in that shattered bomber were no different than men hanging from parachutes. They were helpless. They were not a threat. They could barely fly. Finishing them would be murder, not combat. Franz told Charlie he tried to get them to land in Germany. Pointed down, Maeve, Hysteris, or divert to neutral Sweden, where they would receive medical treatment. But the Americans kept flying toward England, so Franz made a decision. He would escort them through German anti-aircraft positions to protect them from his own side. As they talked, something shifted in both men. Charlie's nightmares began to ease. The question that had haunted him for nearly 5 decades finally had an answer. More than an answer. It had a name, a voice, a real human being on the other end of the line. For Franz, hearing Charlie's voice meant everything. For 47 years, he wondered if his choice mattered, if the bomber crashed into the North Sea, if the crew bled out before reaching England. Now he knew. They lived. All 10 men survived that mission. The 2 arranged to meet in person. 6 months later, they met in Seattle. A camera captured the moment. Franz stepped out of a car, saw Charlie standing there, and ran to embrace him. The 2 men, once enemies separated by war and uniform and nationality, held each other and wept openly. Franz turned to the camera and said softly, I love you, Charlie. They spent the day talking, filling in the missing years. 47 years of silence finally broken. Charlie introduced Franz to other members of his crew, men who were alive because of Franz's choice that December day. Franz met their children, their grandchildren, families that existed because one pilot chose mercy over duty, one man who looked at helpless enemies and saw human beings instead of targets. The meeting proved Professor